Aisha stood near the dining table, fingers pressed together, listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan. The lights were dimmed just enough to feel warm. The cake waited in the center, candles unlit, cream smooth and untouched. The house smelled of spices and fresh bread. Everything looked right, yet nothing felt calm. Her heart beat fast, not from excitement, but from a quiet fear she could not name. She had planned this night carefully, not with noise or grand gestures, but with meaning. 10 years of marriage had taught her that love was not always loud. Sometimes it lived in details. A clean table, a favorite dish, a moment chosen with care. She told herself that this birthday would be different. It had to be. The lock turned. The door opened. Salman stepped inside. He looked tired. His shoulders sagged as if the day had pressed him down. He smiled when he saw her, but it was brief, like a habit remembered rather than a feeling felt. Aisha noticed. She always noticed. She returned the smile anyway and stepped forward to take his jacket. "Happy birthday," she said, keeping her voice light. "Thank you," he replied. His eyes moved around the room, taking in the decorations, the table, the cake. "You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to," she said. They sat to eat. The conversation moved quickly, skimming the surface. Work was busy. Traffic was bad. The food tasted good. Salman laughed at the right moments. Aisha nodded where expected. The words came easily, but none of them mattered. Under the talk, something tight pulled at her chest. Salman checked his phone once, then again. He turned the screen down after the second glance. Aisha saw it. She said nothing. She poured water into his glass and pushed it closer. Her hand shook, but only slightly. She remembered other birthdays, the early ones, when laughter filled the room and silence felt safe. When they shared jokes that belonged only to them. When his eyes searched for hers without effort. Tonight, his gaze drifted away often, as if pulled by a thought he did not want to share. Dinner ended. The plates were cleared. Aisha brought out the cake and set it before him. She lit the candles one by one, each flame steady and bright. The room glowed softly. "Make a wish," she said. Salman leaned forward, closed his eyes, and blew. The candles went out together. Smoke curled into the air, thin and gray. Aisha clapped lightly. He smiled again, wider this time, but the smile faded too fast. She cut the cake and served 2 slices. They ate quietly. The sweetness felt heavy on her tongue. She had waited weeks for this moment. She had practiced her calm. She had chosen her words. Still, her hands felt cold. When the plates were empty, she reached under the table and pulled out a small box. It was simple, wrapped in plain paper, tied with string. She placed it in front of him. Salman raised his eyebrows. "Another gift? This is the main one," she said. He lifted the box and turned it over, as if expecting a clue. He untied the string and opened the lid. Inside lay a folded letter and a small metal key. He picked up the key first, confused. "What is this for?" he asked. "Read the letter," she said. He unfolded the paper. His eyes moved across the page. His face changed slowly, the way a sky darkens before rain. He looked up at her, then back down, then up again. "You want me to go to the study?" he asked. "Yes," she said. Her voice stayed even. "Please." The study room had been closed for a long time. They used it once, years ago, when they both worked from home. Since then, it had become a place of old files and unused shelves. The door creaked when Salman opened it. Aisha followed a few steps behind, her breath shallow. The room smelled of dust and paper. Moonlight slipped through the window, laying pale shapes on the floor. Salman moved toward the desk. The drawer was locked. He hesitated, then slid the key in and turned it. The drawer opened. Inside were neat stacks of printed pages, each clipped together. On top lay a photograph. Salman picked it up first. His fingers froze. The picture showed him at a cafe, leaning forward, smiling in a way Aisha had not seen in months. Across from him sat a woman. Her face was turned away, but her hand rested near his, close enough to touch. Salman's breath caught. He set the photo down and reached for the papers. Messages, dates, times, nothing loud. Nothing dramatic, just words exchanged late at night. Words that carried warmth. Words that built a bridge where one should not exist. Aisha stood still, watching his back. She did not cross her arms. She did not sigh. She had promised herself. No signs of victory, no signs of blame. This was not a trap. It was a mirror. "I found these weeks ago," she said softly. Salman closed his eyes. I didn't read them all at first," she continued. "I wanted to understand before I spoke." He turned to face her. His eyes were wet, not with anger, but with something closer to shame. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. The words rushing out, she lifted a hand. "I know what it is." He stopped. "It's not about bodies," she said. "It's about time, attention, feelings." The room felt smaller. The fan outside hummed on, steady and uncaring. Salman sank into the chair by the desk. His shoulders fell forward. "I didn't plan it," he said. "It just happened." Aisha nodded. "Most things do." He ran a hand through his hair. "I was lonely," he said. "I didn't know how to say it. You were busy. I was busy." It felt easier to talk to someone who didn't expect anything from me. Aya listened. Each word landed like a stone, dropped into water, sending ripples she could feel but not see. She had guessed this part. Guessing did not make it easier. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" she asked. Salman opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at the papers. "I don't know." That answer hurt more than a lie. She stepped closer to the desk and placed her hand on the drawer. "This is your birthday gift," she said. "Not to hurt you, stop us from pretending." He looked up at her, eyes wide. "On my birthday?" "Yes," she said, "because days like this make us honest. Or they should." Silence stretched. Between them it was thick, but it was not empty. For the first time in a long while, they were not hiding behind small talk or tired smiles. The truth sat with them, plain and sharp. "I never stopped loving you," Salman said. Aisha believed him. That was the hardest part. "Love is not the only thing we need," she replied. He nodded slowly. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping across the wall. The light moved on. The room returned to shadow. The drawer stayed open, its contents exposed. Aisha took a step back. Her heart felt light and heavy at the same time. She had crossed the line she had feared for weeks. There was no going back to before. "Finish looking," she said, "then come back to the living room." Salman watched her leave. He stayed seated, staring at the messages, the dates, the proof of a distance he had helped create. The house was quiet again, but the quiet had changed. In the living room, the cake sat half-eaten. The candles lay on the table, bent and cold. Aisha stood by the window and looked out into the night. She did not know what would come next. She only knew that the night had turned and nothing would be the same when he returned. Here's a full, fast-paced 1,800-word part 2, written in simple, flowing English, with emotional depth and dramatic tension. Keeping it monetization safe and adult-themed without explicit content, Salman sat in the study, the drawer still open. In front of him, and the paper spread out like a map of mistakes he hadn't meant to make. The photograph on top remained in his hand, the corners pressing into his palms, and he couldn't bring himself to look at it again. He had seen it enough times already in his mind, but now, seeing it laid bare, it felt heavier, realer, and impossible to ignore. The quiet of the room pressed against him. He could hear his own shallow breaths. He could hear the faint creak of the fan, the whisper of the curtains brushing the floor. Aisha had left him alone, but her presence lingered, a calm force he could not shake. He knew she was waiting, not outside, but in some way. Within the walls of the room, In the spaces between the pages and the keys of the drawer, his fingers traced the printed messages. They were not love letters, not in the romantic sense, but each one held warmth, subtle attention, care that belonged in their home, not in some stranger's world. The dates were precise, showing a pattern that had grown slowly, almost unnoticed, like vines creeping along a wall. He had not thought of it as betrayal at first. It had been casual, harmless, a smile here, a laugh there, a shared thought, an unshared hour. But seeing it documented made him feel the weight of it, each line a quiet echo of his absence at home, of the distance he had let grow. He remembered the evenings he had spent in front of his laptop, fingers, typing and deleting, afraid to hit send but unable to resist. The thrill had been small, almost foolish. A rush he hadn't realized he was chasing. At the time, it seemed harmless. No one was hurt, or so he told himself. But now, as he read the messages again, the truth clawed at him. The warmth he had felt had been taken from Aisha, from their home, from the life they had built together. And for the first time he could feel the emptiness it left behind. He put the photograph down. His eyes fell on the letter, folded neatly at the side of the drawer. He opened it carefully, almost reverently, as if touching the paper would cause it to break. Aisha's handwriting was soft, precise, flowing. Each word was deliberate, each sentence chosen with care. She hadn't written accusations, she hadn't written anger. She had written clarity. She had written the truth, a mirror held gently, without judgment. I don't need you to apologize. The letter began. I need you to see what you've done. Need you to feel it, to understand it, and then to decide what comes next. Love alone cannot fix what has been broken. Tension cannot be replaced with words. Time cannot be ignored. Tonight, you will see what we have lost and perhaps what we can still save. Salman read it twice, 3 times, letting each line sink in. The room seemed smaller now, heavier. He felt a twist in his chest, a mixture of shame and fear and something like hope. The hope frightened him more than the fear because it meant he had a chance. But it also meant he had a responsibility, and he wasn't sure he was ready for either. A knock at the door made him start. He had not realized he had been holding his breath. Aisha stepped inside, soft in the doorway, hands folded lightly in front of her. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply watched as if she had known this moment would come and had prepared herself to see it without flinching. Have you looked at everything? She asked quietly. Her voice was calm, steady, but there was something underneath it, a layer of emotion that made him look up sharply. I think so, he said, though he wasn't sure. His fingers brushed over the edges of the papers again, as if touching them would give him answers he didn't have. Then we need to talk, she said. She didn't move closer. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the space between them. The air seemed charged, alive, like the room was holding its breath along with him. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said, and for the first time that night, his voice sounded real, not careful, not practiced, just honest. They sat across from each other, the papers and photograph between them. He could feel the weight of their years together in the quiet, and he could feel the weight of the months he had drifted away, almost without noticing. He wanted to speak, to explain, but every word felt inadequate. Every excuse seemed hollow. I was lonely, he said finally, in a whisper that barely carried. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't mean to. Aisha held up a hand, gentle, stopping him. I know you didn't mean to, she said, but meaning doesn't erase impact, doesn't fix the distance, doesn't bring back the nights we stopped talking, the mornings I woke alone while you were somewhere else in your thoughts. He swallowed hard. The truth of her words hit him like a wave, relentless, undeniable. He had been living half in their home, half outside of it, and now he could see the cost. The cost was not a fight, was not anger, it was absence. It was a quiet heartbreak that neither of them had spoken aloud until this moment. I didn't realize. He began again. His voice trembled. I thought I was just talking. I thought it was nothing serious. Aisha's eyes softened, but her expression remained firm. Talking is always something. Small things grow. Distance grows. Hot. Grow restless. And then you reach a point where the silence feels louder than the words ever did. He looked down at the photograph again. He remembered the smile he had given, the casual touch of hands, the ease he had felt in someone else's. Presence was something he had once felt with Aisha, but had let slip away. He realized now that the thrill of being noticed, of being admired, had come at the cost of the life he had promised to protect. The person he had promised to love. Tears pricked his eyes. He hated them at first. He hated that he had reached this point, hated that his mistakes were so tangible, so undeniable. But there was no way to run, no way to hide. And for the first time, he felt that raw, uncomfortable truth that people rarely face. He had lost the easy comfort of avoidance. Aisha didn't speak for a moment. She let him feel it. The room stayed still. The fan whispered, the moonlight moved across the floor. Then she said, "You have to decide now. Do you want to continue hiding in excuses, or do you want to come back to us? Not for me, not for tonight. It's for us, for everything we've built together." Her words were soft, but they landed with precision. Okay? Were not demands. They were not ultimatums. They were a choice. And it was his choice to make. Salman sat silently, staring at the papers, the photograph, the drawer, the room. He felt the weight of years pressing on him, the cost of nights spent elsewhere. The nights of quiet longing in their home when he was supposed to be present. He remembered the small things he had taken for granted. The way she laughed when he told a joke she didn't understand. Kay. The way she hummed while folding laundry. The way her hand fit in his without thinking. He had chased something fleeting and left behind what mattered most. He reached out, picking up the photograph again. His thumb brushed over the image, the faces blurred by memory and regret. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. Aisha shook her head. "No one deserves grace," she said. "But sometimes it is given anyway." That's what tonight is. It's not about punishment. It's about truth. And it's about whether we are willing to face it. He nodded slowly. The room felt smaller, yet lighter. The papers and photograph remained between them. A reminder, a bridge. And a challenge all at once. "I want to try," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "I want to make it right. I want to come back." Aisha studied him for a moment, searching for the honesty she needed. And when she saw it, the quiet relief in her chest was tempered by caution. She had heard promises before. She had seen words fail. But tonight felt different. Tonight the truth had been laid bare, and he had seen it fully. "Then we start here," she said. "Not with grand gestures, not with magic fixes. We start with honesty, with presence, with attention. We start with the things we ignored while pretending they were small." He nodded again, determination settling into his chest. He felt the weight of the night, of the mistakes, of the distance. But he also felt something else, a fragile, tentative hope. He could not undo the past, but perhaps he could face the future fully. With her, they spent the rest of the night in quiet conversation, not shouting, not pleading, not defending. Just speaking, just listening, sharing feelings, fears, regrets, and small plans for how they might rebuild what had been lost. The study room, once dusty and silent, became a place of beginning, a witness to truth and a space for a fragile, tentative reconnection. By the time dawn began to seep through the curtains, painting the walls in pale gold, they had not solved everything. There were no answers that could fix years of quiet drift. But there was something far more important: honesty, presence, and the first steps toward rebuilding trust. Salman glanced at Aisha. She was tired but calm, determined, but not hardened. She had given him the chance to see clearly, to feel clearly, and now he had to decide what to do with it. The papers in the drawer remained, silent reminders, but they no longer felt like accusations. They were a record of choices, of missteps, and of the opportunity to choose differently going forward. He took a deep breath. The air felt fresher, somehow clearer. He had faced his mistakes, faced the truth, and now the real work began. Not with grand gestures, not with apologies repeated until they lost M. The first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, soft and pale, painting the room in shades of gold and shadow. Aisha sat quietly in the study, the faint scent of the night's tea still lingering in the air, while Salman remained across from her, tense, restless, yet more awake than he had been in months. The previous night had been long, filled with truths that weighed heavily on both their hearts. They had spoken, listened, and admitted things they had kept silent for far too long. But now, with the morning stretching quietly around them, fragile clarity had settled. Salman's hands rested on the desk, fingers tracing invisible patterns on the wood. He had gone over the photographs, the messages, the letters again and again. And each time it hurt more. Yet it taught him something he had avoided for years. Absence could not be filled with excuses. Regret, he realized, would only become unbearable. If he did not act, if he did not truly step back into the life he had nearly abandoned. Aisha's eyes met his, steady and calm. There was no judgment in her gaze, only a quiet strength that carried the weight of every silent night she had spent wondering where he was in his mind. Who he spoke to when she thought he was working, what he shared while pretending to be distant. She did not need to ask the questions aloud. The truth had already spoken. "I don't know if I can ever undo the nights I lost," Salman said finally, voice low, raw, and unpracticed. "But I want to. I need to try." Aisha's lips curved. Slightly, not a smile, but a soft acknowledgement. Trying is the first step. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't erase the pain, the silence, the distance. But it can change the next step, if we take it together. He nodded, swallowing hard. He felt as if a weight had lifted, and yet pressed down at the same time, a strange paradox of relief and responsibility. The gift she had given him the night before the letters, the key, the truth was more than a revelation. It was a challenge, and he now understood that the only way forward was through honesty, not avoidance. They spent hours that morning in quiet conversation, piecing together fragments of what had been broken. Salman admitted things he had never spoken aloud, the moments he had felt unnoticed, the small irritations he had ignored, the loneliness he had allowed to grow without mentioning it. Aisha did not interrupt. She let him speak, let him carry the weight of his own words. But when he faltered, she offered a gentle reminder. "I want to hear you fully. But I also want us to remember that we are still together, even in these moments." That line struck him more than anything. He had thought distance made separation inevitable, but it had not. They were still here, in the same room, facing the same truths. And that realization, fragile as it was, gave him a glimmer of hope. They moved slowly from confessions to plans. Salman promised small things, deliberate gestures, time for conversation, attention to her thoughts, presence that went beyond the physical. Aisha listened, and she asked for clarity, for action, for consistency. She did not demand perfection, but she did demand honesty. And he could give that as the morning turned into afternoon. The house seemed to breathe with them. The tension softened, though it did not disappear. They prepared tea together in the quiet kitchen, each movement deliberate, attentive. Aisha laughed softly when he spilled a little sugar on the counter. Salman laughed too, genuinely this time, not the polite kind that had haunted previous mornings. The sound felt foreign and familiar all at once, like a memory remembered after. Years of forgetting. Later, they sat on the sofa, hands brushing occasionally, sharing small anecdotes of days past, times they had loved and moments they had overlooked. The stories flowed easily, naturally, without the weight of expectation. In those moments, Salman realized that love had never disappeared. It had simply been buried under routine, under distractions, under the quiet accumulation of unspoken thoughts. And now, with truth in the room, the love could breathe again. But rebuilding trust was not easy. It would never be easy. There were moments when silence returned, heavy and uncomfortable. Moments when past mistakes felt like cliffs they could fall off of at any second. Salman recognized these moments and met them with presence, with honesty. He did not hide behind excuses. He did not avoid uncomfortable questions. He faced them, knowing that the courage to stay and repair was worth far more than the comfort of avoidance. Aisha, for her part, allowed herself to be vulnerable as well. She admitted fears she had carried quietly for months, fears of being ignored, of being replaced, of being alone in a marriage she had fought to maintain. She admitted moments of resentment, of longing, of quiet heartbreak. And Salman listened, absorbing each word without defense, without interruption, without distraction. He held space for her emotions as carefully as she had held space for his. Confessions. They talked about the future too, but carefully, without grand promises or unrealistic plans. They spoke of daily routines, of small acts of care, of attention that went unnoticed but mattered. They spoke of honesty as a habit, not a one-time confession. They spoke of love as a choice, a deliberate effort, rather than something that simply existed by default. By evening, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the walls. The study room, once a place of secrets and hidden distance, had become a sanctuary of truth and fragile hope. The drawer, once a symbol of hidden mistakes, now felt like a bridge of passage between what had been and what could be. Salman closed it gently, leaving the papers inside but carrying their lessons with him. Aisha followed him into the living room, where the remnants of the birthday night still lingered. The cake was half-eaten, candles bent and cold. They did not return to it. Instead, they sat together on the sofa, shoulders touching lightly, hands brushing in unintentional contact that felt deliberate. They did not speak immediately. Words were unnecessary for a while. The silence was shared, comfortable in a way it had not been for years. Finally, Salman spoke, voice quiet but steady. "I know we can't fix everything overnight. I know it. Will take time. But I am ready to try with everything I have." Aisha looked at him, searching for signs of sincerity. She found them in his eyes, in the way he leaned slightly forward, in the tension in his shoulders that showed effort, not posture. She nodded slowly. "Then we begin," she said. "Step by step, day by day. Not as perfection, but as progress. Not as promises, but as actions." They sat together, side by side, watching the evening settle over the house. The golden light of sunset spilled across the room, painting them in warmth. It felt symbolic, though they did not speak of it. The quiet presence of one another, the shared acknowledgement of mistakes and desire to rebuild, carried a weight far greater than words could capture. Over the next few hours, they continued to talk, not as husband and wife pretending, but as to people rebuilding connection. They laughed softly at memories they had almost forgotten. They shared moments of tenderness, small touches and glances that reminded them of why they had chosen each other in the first place. They did not rush. They did not demand. They simply existed together, honestly, vulnerably, and with intent. As night fell, Aisha prepared the bedroom, soft blankets and quiet lighting. Salman helped, small gestures that felt monumental after months of absence. The house was still. The world outside continued, indifferent, but inside there was a quiet shift. Something had changed, something significant, though subtle. The night was not about celebration, not about gifts or cakes. It was about presence, honesty, and the willingness to love deliberately. When they finally laid down, side by side, the weight of the days settled around them, but not as oppression. It was a weight of truth, of shared understanding, of fragile hope. They did not speak much. Words were unnecessary now. Their hands found each other naturally, fingers entwined without effort, breaths synchronized, small movements of comfort. Of reassurance, Salman thought about the gift Aisha had given him the night before the letters. The key, the confrontation disguised as a present. He realized it had been more than a gift. It had been a mirror he had needed but resisted. It had forced him to see himself, to confront choices, to face the impact of his absence. And now, that clarity was a foundation, a beginning, a chance to choose differently. Aisha felt the same. She had given him truth, not punishment. She had given him opportunity, not revenge. She had given him space to face himself, and in doing so, she had also faced her own fears, her own longings, her own doubts. She felt exhausted, yet light. She felt sorrow, yet hope. And in that balance, she understood that love was not simple, but it was real. It was earned, preserved, and rebuilt through courage and honesty. Hours passed. Sleep came slowly, gently, but not without awareness. They were both conscious of the fragility of the moment, the delicate balance between past, mistakes, and future intentions. And yet, for the first time in a long while, they faced it together, not as separate lives brushing past each other, but as two hearts willing to rebuild what had almost been lost. When dawn came again, they awoke side by side, hands still touching, the quiet of the night settling around them. The study room, the letters, the photograph, they were still there, reminders of mistakes and lessons learned. But now, they were not burdens. They were guides. They were symbols of choice, of attention, of the courage to face truth, and of the power of deliberate love. Salman turned to